Okay, so everybody is comfortable with the amendments to the committee, to the calendar? Do we have a motion to approve?
I would move to approve the calendar as presented.
Second?
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the review of the score sheet. I know that we had a lot of discussion last time with regards to the things that we would like to see on the score sheet and what changes would like to be made. We have started going through that one. Who would like to start with that discussion? Any changes or anything that stands out from the last time that we met?
I'll just throw in that there were a lot of discussions, and so I worked quite a bit with Corey, and I think she did a fabulous job, and so I've seen this, I was part of working on this, and I'm fine with it.
Mr. Schmidt, do you have any
There
comments?
was one in particular Nathan wanted to see done. We hoped we hit it for what you were hoping for.
Do you have a copy of that?
I do.
I have it on my phone, but it's getting old and my eyes aren't as good.
We made a number of changes from what it had last time.
The duplication of services one is, yeah.
Well, you might note, I mean, we actually ended up getting rid of one of the sections, and then rather than reallocate the numbers, we just, Corey just said, let's leave it at 95 points. So,
We were fairly exhausted at that point, right?
yep. I mean, because the agencies don't have this, and we did talk about it quite a bit, maybe Corey should briefly.
I was going to, once we have the final, ask Corey to go ahead and go through it.
I'm fine. I think all of my issues are addressed in here.
Okay. At this point in time, since the committee feels comfortable with regards to the direction that the form has taken, and this more than likely will be the final, could you please go through the final sheet,
Sure.
touch upon the highlights?
The highlights?
Yes.
Okay, great, even better. Okay, so the first question was about suitability of City of Topeka funding. So we essentially we changed that from city priorities to does the program have a significant impact on the community? So whether or not the impact was clear or not. So a more need-related question. Under duplication, we did change that at request of the agencies. Services are not duplicated or duplicated as justified is 5 points now. 3 points duplication is explained but not satisfactory justified, and then 0 with duplication is not explained. Changes there. Agency has a agency has a formal process and is using client input. Was a slight change to that question, and we added 5 points for client input. Input is formalized and input is used, so that's the only change on that item. Under org leadership, we asked if it was strong and maintains community-based representation. 5 points was given if it was 15. The leadership was 15%. Made of racial or ethnic minorities, is less than 70% of one gender, meets regularly with over 65% attendance, and has a healthy mix of needed skills and resources. 3 points were given if you had 3 out of 4 of those criteria, and 0 points were given. There's a lot of strike-throughs on this form. 0 points were given, less than 3 criteria have been met on that line. Past grant administration, 10 points were given for reporting and invoicing is on time and paperwork is accurate. 5 points, reporting on time but paperwork is not accurate, and 0 if grant administration is not effective. We removed government partnerships from the application and removed that section to worth only 5 points, which with just regards to private partnerships, which we didn't change. So that would total our points to 95 instead of 100 for this year. So,
And then the additional
yes. Mhm.
proviso?
Yes.
That's the bottom.
The ECD committee may choose not to recommend any agency or programs, any new programs, or may fund programs with provisos.
At this point, does the committee have any comments? Do any of the social service organizations have any questions with regards to this, or any comments that they wish to make?
Absolutely.
Could you please identify yourself?
Sure. 5 points would be given for board makeup. 5 points would be given for 15% made of racial or ethnic minorities. If the board is less than 70% of one gender, meets regularly with over 65% attendance, and has a healthy mix of needed skills and resources. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Homlish?
Excuse me, last year there was some discussion about decision.
Could you please approach the podium? I'm sorry.
For the TV audience.
That's right.
For the audience watching at home.
The television audience can't hear us unless we're at a
Oh,
podium.
okay. No, that's fine, that's fine. John Homeless Community Action. Last year, and this is more directed, I think, to Corey and to Rochelle. Last year, there was discussion of whether and to what extent an agency meeting its targets would be penalized in the subsequent year. Now, I don't know how that was resolved. I didn't hear it in the scoring sheet, but is that a factor that was removed from the discussion?
Are you referring to past grant administration?
Right.
Yeah, that is still a question on the score sheet. I only referred to the questions that were changed from last year.
Okay, but that continues to be there. Now,
Correct.
is there a provision in that where an agency might not meet its targets because of external factors that it didn't have any control over?
If I may, I believe, are you referring to the CDBG funds not coming out till a little bit
Right.
later? Okay, that will be factored in when we're looking at past grant administration. So what's happening is the CDBG grant, when we can't really allocate those funds until we get those funds, and then it's much later in the year. And so that was kind of a factor last year, and we'll be addressing that this year when we're putting a score to that, so.
Well, are you then going to come back to the agencies after the allocation is made to revise its targets?
We would revise, yes, we would revise the outcomes and
Okay.
outputs on that from the time period of when we can actually start that grant till the end of that year.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the social service organizations?
Are there any people in the audience that are new to this process that haven't seen that score sheet before? Okay, maybe we could have Corey just read the headers and the number of points. She was just reading what the changes were, so they might not.
Sure. So I'll read the headers and this sub-item underneath it. The first one, suitability of city funding, or City of Topeka funding. This is required. This is need, 15 points. Project has demonstrated need is what we are measuring there. The next one, issues and outcomes, 45 points. Subheadings, outputs and outcomes are clear and related to identified needs. A plan has been identified to measure outputs and outcomes. Unduplicated services or any duplication with other services is explained and or adequately defended. Applicant has achieved outputs and outcomes on prior grants. Capacity is worth 30 points. Subheadings are organization has the resources to produce the proposed outcomes efficiently and effectively. Agency has formal process and is using client input. Org leadership is strong and maintains community-based representation. Past grant administration is effective. The next one is collaboration and partnerships, which worth 5 points, and that one is related to private partnerships and how many partners you have, for a total of 95 points.
Any other comments or questions, both from the public and from the committee?
One, as I see this, now that we've consolidated the partnership one, I wonder if we shouldn't strike the term private, both in the headline as well as in the detail, in that what we wanted to do was not require partnerships with government if it didn't really fit the work of the organization, and there had been feedback from the agencies about that. But the government might be the partners. It wouldn't just have to be private ones. And so what we're looking for is collaboration and networking in the community. So
Okay.
does that make sense, Corey?
Yes, so leave the heading collaboration and partnerships, but take off private.
Just
under
take
the
private out
partnership
in those
section.
2 places.
Okay.
I think that'll serve what was intended by the committee.
Mr. Schmidt, are you okay with those changes? Okay.
Yes, that sounds reasonable.
Move to approve,
Do I
as
have a
amended.
second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, scoring sheet has been approved. Next item on the agenda is changes to the application. Ms. Wright, could you go over the changes made to the application after the discussion in the last meeting?
All right. We decided that we needed a question on program need added to the application, and we are measuring that. In lieu of city priorities, we asked for need on the score sheet. So the question is, describe the community need that is proposed, that this proposal addresses, and how is it relative to what you are trying to accomplish. So that would be item 1. Under program, on program narratives, we still have program outputs. We did not change anything there. On program outcomes, we took out just some language that should make it clearer for everybody, and added, describe the program's projected 2014 and actual 2014 outcomes. If you were unable to achieve the program's projected and actual outcomes, if you were unable, please explain here. Then describe the program's projected outcomes for 2016. If you're proposing new outcomes for this funding cycle, please identify them here as well. The next question we added was outcome measurement method. Describe the data source and data collection method you will be using to assess output and outcome attainment. The next one is the agencies should be quite familiar with, is our program output and outcome sheet that they're scoring on currently, so that should be very familiar for them. We added language, output 1 should directly relate to outcome 1, output 2 to outcome 2, etc., just for clarity. And that's it on that sheet. Under, we did take out the logic model on that. So that's out. On program narratives number 6, duplication, please discuss whether this service is duplicated by another agency, and if so, address why the duplication is justified based on community need was added. Collaborative partnerships, we did remove the government section, so please include relationships with city and county government was removed. Question 8 was removed. Is this requested allocation being used for matching funds for another grant? Board composition, we did remove the question, how is the board representative of the community and the people served by your agency, largely due to the questions beneath that, which would answer that question. We did add the question, explain how your board includes a healthy mix of needed skills and resources essential to program success. We added, how frequently does your board meet? We did end up removing the question that was, are there any current or former consumers on the board, which we discussed at the last meeting. We took that back out. We added the question, has the program had any internal evaluation or conversation with others, such as funders or stakeholders, to assess cost effectiveness and/or whether the program needs to be changed to meet the current needs of the community? If yes, please describe. And those are the changes to the application.
Does the committee have any comments with regards to the changes made or any amendments?
I want to thank Corey again for her hard work on this, and one of the things that we did was to really, we think that every question on the application will tie to the scoring sheet and vice versa, so that there's a reason for each question and it makes a difference. And we tried to cover some of the things that were hanging out and that the feedback had covered, so.
Does the public have any questions or comments with regards to the application? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the application?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We have a final application. Next item on the agenda is to review changes to the RFP. Ms. Wright?
Sure. Honestly, the only change to this, besides dates that will be updated from our calendar, is the appeal process, which has been changed significantly since our last meeting. And I'll read that. Once grant applications have been received by the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Development, a review committee will be formed to do initial scoring. The scores will be presented to the Economic and Development Committee for consideration. The ECD committee will then make their recommendations for funding. Grant applicants submitting a proposal for grant funds have the right to appeal if the ECD committee does not recommend funding. The request for appeal shall be made in writing or by mail within 7 calendar days to the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Development, 620 Southeast Madison, first floor, Unit 8, Topeka, Kansas, 66607. Attention, Rochelle Vega Ratana. Once all appeals have been received, a meeting will be scheduled with the ECD committee. Each agency will have the opportunity to present justification for their appeal. The ECD committee will consider the request and report back to the agencies within 7 calendar days.
Any comments from the committee? Questions? Ms. Hiller?
But one question. On the 5th line, it says that the ECD committee would meet, grant applicants submitting a proposal for grant funds have the right to appeal if the ECD committee does not recommend funding. When I read that, it sounded like we cut them off, that the only appeal was available if they weren't funded at all. Is that what you meant?
Yes.
So your thought was that there's no right to appeal if somebody wants to talk about what their allocation was?
It was my understanding that that's what we were doing with the appeal process. I think if we're trying to be consistent with the scoring and the committee's agency, that would be the appeal process that we would have in place. Otherwise, we would have 25 agencies possibly appealing, and we wouldn't be within our process, it feels. Just my thoughts.
I think the appeal should be limited to the scoring. The score is what should be appealed, not the allocation.
Good
The
point.
allocation is at the discretion of the ECD committee and ultimately the council and how much money is allowed. And I think that's what we want to try to avoid is the process where, you know, like you said, everybody wants more money, which
Right.
everybody could use more money. I have no doubt, but the appeal needs to be based on a mistake in the scoring. If somebody feels that they were judged unfairly in the scoring, that needs to be the appeal. The appeal can't be, we think we get more money. it should be, it should have to address a specific issue within the scoring. Does that,
Yeah, that sounds
Mhm.
perfectly acceptable.
Ms. Hiller?
I agree. And I wasn't sure what the answer was, but I didn't think, I thought we wanted to accept any appeals because A, we wanted to hear people and give them an opportunity, and B, we didn't want them to go straight to the council. So we've got to be able to, how would we rephrase that then so that it says what you said?
Should the grantee not be satisfied with the score received?
I'm trying to think, you could say, you could require that the appeal identify and address the specific scoring metric that they feel is incorrect. And I think that would improve the process, because if they lost 10 points on category B, they would come in and they would say, we lost 10 points on category B, here's our evidence why we think we should get those points. And, you know, it would be specific. We would be dealing with, you know, specific appeals, not emotional appeals or generalized appeals. And
we really are wanting to lean on the scoring
and
as the driver.
we can lean on the scoring that way, and I think it would probably expedite the process as well, because you would have to come up with a specific case for a specific loss of points or cases. So I guess that
agree. I didn't catch exactly.
I'm trying to think.
Down.
So now I have to put that modification into words.
May I offer another thought?
You may.
My only other concern with this is, let's say that somebody got a 95% and they feel that they should have gotten 100. So are we gonna go ahead and say for scores below a certain percentage? Because, I mean, it goes back to the whole thing of saying, well, I was not satisfied with the fact that I didn't get 100, but I still got a 90, and I want a better score because I know that a better score would equate to more funding. So therefore,
I think that's fine, but if you do that, you have to present a case. If you don't present a case, I think it would be very easy for the committee to look at that and say denied. And we'll go with your original score.
Ms. Wright, you have comments?
Yes. So I'm recalling last year, for example, I know I had several people approach and say, well, but we do this activity. And I said, I know you do because I know your agency, but it wasn't in the application. So I guess if we're having two review committees, one completely separate from yours, we're scoring over here, you're reviewing those scores for accuracy, do we really want to set it up where everyone can appeal every single decision that's being made from two separate committees? Just putting that out there. If we did the appeal process for people not funded, I think that's a reasonable, process, because we're not funding them. There could be significant changes in the community, and we would want to address those. But for an agency to be able to appeal every question that maybe is scored not to their liking, if two committees have said that wasn't a sufficient answer, that wasn't a sufficient, then maybe that should be the way it is.
And in respect to what Ms. Wright is saying, I could vividly remember
Yes.
organizations that did not fill in the information. However, basing it on scoring specifically, it would give an organization the opportunity to say, I didn't put it in the application, however, here is my evidence. So a
Well,
fault of somebody not filling out their application correctly because they did not get the scoring, if we don't write it correctly, it would give an organization an opportunity to say, okay, here, let's amend it now.
Well, I don't think we allow new evidence. I mean, I think you appeal the scoring based on the evidence presented, and you can present your application that says, you gave me 5 points, I should have gotten 10 points. Here's the evidence that I presented in my application, and that's the extent of the evidence that's allowed in an appeal. You wouldn't be able to come in and rewrite your application at that point.
Ms. Wright?
Then we would probably need to change the appeal process, because in the appeal process, we worded it as they would have the opportunity to present their justification, which indicates they would be able to explain. So, I
Well,
mean,
and I think you can explain the evidence in your
Absolutely.
application. You just can't have, no outcomes in it and then bring 10 outcomes to an appeal that weren't in your existing one. Now, if you have 10 outcomes in your original proposal and the two committees decided that those outcomes, weren't good or weren't presented properly, you can argue your case that those 10 outcomes do meet whatever requirement is needed, or what, depending on whatever situation you're talking about. You can't present new ones, is the way I am envisioning this process.
Ms. Wright? My question at this point would be, looking at what we have in front of us, and with the changes that we're discussing, would it be prudent to take just a few minutes to rewrite this?
rewrite the appeal process or rewrite?
That portion of the appeal that we're trying to amend?
Yes, that would be wise.
Okay. We'll pause for, just say, 5 minutes, just to allow for the committee and for the staff to reword this. That way we could present it back to the committee and be able to approve this RFP.